What if the mainstream therapy you are using to heal your inner child is actually a trap designed by your own mind to keep you weak, paralyzed, and completely terrified of life? Should not forget that every neurosis entails a corresponding amount of demoralization. If a man is neurotic, he has lost absolute confidence in himself. Welcome back to the inner multiverse. Look closely around you today, past the blinking screens, the corporate towers, and the carefully curated illusions of modern happiness. A quiet, suffocating epidemic is spreading through our entire civilization, a profound and unspoken fear of life itself. We are living in an age where an unprecedented number of individuals are plagued by a chronic state of anxiety, a heavy blanket of depression, and a paralyzing sense of guilt and shame. Yet, instead of standing up and facing life's challenges, the modern individual instinctively shrinks from them. We allow a sudden rush of anxiety to limit our immediate experience, and we allow a subtle, creeping cowardice to completely strangle our latent potential. But what if the mainstream solutions we are being sold every single day are actually designed to keep us weak? What if the comforting therapies telling you to look backward are secretly reinforcing your prison walls? Carl Jung believed that those who evade life's challenges, those who choose comfort over confrontation and suffer from psychological distress as a result, are trapped in a neurosis. He saw this neurotic illness not as a sudden biological accident, but as an extremely prevalent systemic decay in the Western world. To Jung, a neurosis is a humiliating defeat, and it is felt as a deeply shameful failure by anyone who is not entirely unconscious of their own psychology. It is a silent surrender, a choice to step off the battlefield of the present and retreat into a dark, stagnant comfort zone. But here is the terrifying truth that nobody wants to admit. The human mind cannot tolerate prolonged stagnation without eventually destroying itself. When you choose to evade the necessary struggles of your existence, that avoided energy doesn't just vanish. It turns directly inward, transforming your own mind into a hostile territory filled with self-loathing, existential dread, and a terrifying sense of meaninglessness. You are left with a broken spirit, looking at a world you are too afraid to enter. If you want to understand how to break this cycle, how to reclaim your internal fire and weaponize your mind against this modern decay, make sure to subscribe to the Inner Multiverse right now. Your support gives us the raw motivation to continue producing these deep explorations into human liberation, helping us keep the spirit of freedom alive in an increasingly compliant world. As a fellow traveler navigating this modern wilderness, I have spent years trying to understand why this specific psychological sickness is so devastatingly difficult to cure. I used to believe the common lies. I used to think that if we just analyzed ourselves enough, if we just found the right medical label or the perfect explanation, the pain would disappear. But I was completely wrong. The terrifying genius of a neurosis lies in its uncanny capacity for self-deception. When a person loses their internal nerve, when they lose that vital spiritual nerve required to face reality, they almost never admit to their own hen knot. Instead, the ego scrambles to construct a historical alibi. We instinctively turn our eyes backward, away from the immediate, demanding challenges of the today, and begin a desperate, obsessive excavation of our personal history. We demand to know, who broke my will? What past event is responsible for my current paralysis? This backward turn is the ultimate modern trap. We live in a mass culture that actively encourages us to transform our personal suffering into a permanent historical shield. We are taught to treat our past as an unchangeable script that completely dictates our present failures. We build an entire identity out of being a victim of our yesterdays, safely insulated from the terrifying reality of what we are failing to do right now. But this historical search is a dangerous, seductive illusion. By constantly looking behind us, we commit a catastrophic psychological error. We mistake the distant origin of our pain for the actual force that keeps the pain alive in the present moment. The neurosis loves this backward turn. It thrives in the shadows of your childhood memories, feeding greedily on your reluctance to stand up, look at the clock, and face the absolute immediacy of the today. We are playing a highly dangerous game with our own minds, weaponizing our yesterdays to justify our current paralysis. And the true tragedy is that the longer we look back, the more the present slips through our fingers until we realize we have excused ourselves out of a life entirely. This desperate flight into the past brings us directly to the edge of a highly deceptive psychological cliff, the mainstream obsession with what Carl Jung termed the reductive therapeutic approach. In our current cultural landscape, we are constantly bombarded by an entire industry of therapists, self-help gurus, and pop psychology influencers who command us to endlessly excavate our childhoods. They promise an absolute liberation if we just spend enough time dissecting our parents, uncovering family secrets, and pontificating on the precise historical triggers of our current misery. The core doctrine of this widespread approach is simple. If you can map out the structural damage of your upbringing, you will achieve a profound self-acceptance by realizing that you are not to blame for your own suffering. But as I watched this philosophy take over our collective mindset, I began to see a dark, unmentioned pattern emerge. This relentless focus on childhood doesn't cure people. Instead, it provides them with a socially sanctioned, intellectually sophisticated hiding place. It satisfies a deeply rooted, destructive human desire to wallow in self-commiserating memories and to use our history as a permanent get-out-of-jail-free card for our present failures. Jung observed this exact phenomenon with an unyielding clarity, noting that there is scarcely a neurotic who does not love to dwell upon the evils of the past and to excuse his current stagnation because of it. Let us be completely honest about the reality of human development. A dysfunctional household, poor role models, and parents who are themselves emotionally broken will absolutely shatter a child's psychological foundation. Jung did not deny this trauma. In fact, he went so far as to suggest that when a child is neurotic, the blame can almost always be placed solely on the mental condition of the parents. A child's psychic life is not its own. It is entirely dependent on and suffocated by the unlived lives and psychological sickness of the mother and father. But a tragedy occurs when a neurotic child matures into a neurotic adult, and they refuse to realize that the rules of existence have fundamentally changed. The mainstream narrative wants you to remain a child forever, pointing your finger at the past. But the harsh, liberating truth of Jungian psychology is that as we age, responsibility shifts completely. Jung wrote that the real transformative therapy only begins when the patient finally sees that it is no longer father and mother who are standing in his way, but himself. A middle-aged man is not paralyzed today because his parents failed him 30 years ago. He is paralyzed because he has failed to cultivate the raw courage required to face the immediate, terrifying problems of his current life. The original wound may have occurred in your childhood, but a neurosis can only remain active if there is a cause existing in the absolute immediacy of the present. By allowing ourselves to be drawn into the reductive trap, we are participating in a brilliant act of unconscious sabotage. Patients often have a pronounced, highly suspicious tendency to account for their ailments by some long past experience, ingeniously drawing attention away from their current failures. It is far easier to cry over a 20-year-old memory than it is to look into the mirror today and admit that you are actively choosing cowardice over growth. To shatter this comforting illusion once and for all, Jung offered a biological comparison that should be permanently burned into our consciousness. A man is not dying of tuberculosis today because he was infected with a bacillus 20 years ago. He is dying because active, aggressive foci of infection are destroying his lungs right now. The historical details of when, where, and how that infection occurred are completely irrelevant to the cure. The most accurate, flawless knowledge of your medical history cannot heal your lungs, and the most perfect intellectual map of your childhood trauma cannot cure your soul. The infection is active today, and it must be fought on the battleground of today. Furthermore, this cultural obsession with intense, endless self-investigation is not benign. It can actually degenerate into a psychological disease of its own. The great philosopher Immanuel Kant issued a severe warning that should make every modern self-analysis enthusiast pause. To wish to play the spy upon oneself, Kant wrote, is to completely reverse the natural order of our cognitive powers. This desperate desire for internal hyperscrutiny is either already a disease of the mind, a form of spiritual hypochondria, or it will inevitably lead straight to the madhouse. When we turn our analytical tools entirely inward, picking apart our memories like an undertaker dissecting a corpse, we systematically paralyze our capacity for spontaneous, courageous action. We become trapped in an intellectual hall of mirrors, using our intellect not as a weapon to conquer the real world, but as a shovel to dig a deeper historical grave for our potential. This paralyzing fixation on our yesterdays becomes even more tragic when we confront a devastating reality that modern culture desperately tries to ignore. The history we are banting our lives upon is an absolute mirage. When we turn our eyes backward to audit our childhoods, we mistakenly believe we are looking through a crystal clear window at raw, objective facts. In reality, we are peering through a series of highly distorted, corrupt interpretive filters, making an objective account of our personal history a practical impossibility. The past is not a fixed monument carved in stone. It is a fluid, living shadow that is constantly being reshaped by how we feel about our lives in the absolute immediacy of right now. If you are depressed, anxious, or stagnant in the present moment, your current psychological defeat acts as a toxic lens over your entire memory bank. This negative state will instinctively lead you to focus exclusively on the miseries, the rejections, and the disappointments of your childhood. You will become completely blind to all the light, the moments of joy, the support, and the early victories that also existed, because your current pain demands a narrative of unadulterated victimization to justify itself. Conversely, if you are content, powerful, and aggressively moving forward today, you can look back at the exact same childhood and see an entirely different landscape. You will remember the bad events not as permanent, crippling scars, but as vital, necessary trials that sculpted you into the resilient individual you are now. I find it profoundly unsettling to realize that the past does not actually create our present state. Rather, our present state actively manufactures, edits, and colors our past. This psychological distortion runs far deeper than mere selective memory. Our minds routinely manufacture entirely false memories to protect the ego from the terrifying demands of personal accountability. As Carol Tavris and Elliot Aronson brilliantly expose in Mistakes Were Made But Not By Me, false memories allow people to forgive themselves and justify their mistakes, but they do so at a devastatingly high price: a total inability to take responsibility for their lives. The human ego hates cognitive dissonance. It cannot bear the brutal realization that I am acting like a coward who is afraid of life today. To resolve this intense internal friction, the mind ingeniously alters the past, exaggerating old conflicts or creating entirely fabricated narratives of trauma to build a comforting shield. I am not weak. I am simply broken by what they did to me. This appreciation of the profound malleability of human memory should force us to hold our historical narratives much more lightly. We must drop the arrogant certainty that our memories are always accurate, and we must aggressively let go of the highly appealing impulse to use our yesterdays to legitimize the failures of today. We are often warned to be careful what we wish for because it might come true, but as I examine the wreckage of the modern psyche, I realize we must be infinitely more careful about which memories we select to justify our lives, because we will be forced to live by them. If you deliberately select and cherish a history of helplessness, you are voluntarily sentencing yourself to a lifetime of paralysis. Now, some will fiercely argue that this endless digging into the past is a necessary evil, an essential mission to unearth repressed traumas that the conscious mind has supposedly hidden away to protect itself. But when we step out of the realm of pop psychology folklore and look at empirical reality, this comforting theory completely falls apart. The clinical psychologist Richard McNally, in his definitive work, Remembering Trauma, delivers a crushing blow to this therapeutic mythology, writing that the notion that the mind protects itself by repressing or dissociating memories of trauma, rendering them inaccessible to awareness, is a piece of psychiatric folklore devoid of convincing empirical support. The actual, brutal reality of genuine trauma is not a hidden, forgotten memory that needs to be delicately uncovered by an analyst. The real tragedy of trauma is precisely the opposite. It is the absolute, agonizing inability to stop thinking about the event, and the failure of the mind to prevent those horrific memories from violently intruding when the individual desperately wishes to forget. The belief that your current neurosis is caused by a secret, invisible childhood scar that you have magically forgotten is a beautifully designed fantasy. The things that disrupted your development are usually visible, but the thing keeping you broken right now is not a hidden memory from 20 years ago. It is the tangible, active spirit of avoidance that you are practicing today, hiding behind the ghost of a past that your mind is continuously rewriting. Once we recognize that the past is a shifting mirage used primarily as a shield for our current cowardice, we are forced to abandon the reductive sinking ship and step onto the firm ground of what Carl Jung called the constructive approach. This radical shift in perspective completely does away with the pathological need to delve into the dead archives of your childhood. Instead, the constructive approach forcefully pivots your attention to the immediate, tangible obstacles of the present that are actively blocking you from actualizing a better future. As Jung beautifully articulated, the constructive standpoint asks how, out of this very present psyche, a sturdy bridge can be built into its own future. I find this perspective immensely liberating because it is fundamentally teleological. Teleology is the study of ends, purposes, and ultimate goals, and it rests on a profound psychological truth that modern pop psychology desperately tries to obscure. The ideals, the masteries, and the long-term goals we actively aim at are infinitely more powerful in sculpting our mindset and our character than any of the structural damage in our past. Human beings are not mindless rocks being mechanically pushed from behind by historical forces. We are evolutionary engines designed to be pulled forward by our visions of tomorrow. When your vision of the future is vacant, terrifying, or completely non-existent, your present psyche instantly collapses into the suffocating vacuum of neurosis. Therefore, if we genuinely wish to heal from this modern malaise, Jung argues that our overarching non-negotiable objective must be the deliberate development of our personality toward a state of psychological wholeness. This wholeness is not a state of fragile perfection, but a state of dynamic integration, attained only when we have the courage to actualize our latent potentials. It demands that we reach into the dark, neglected corners of our being and pull our hidden strengths, our suppressed talents, and our dormant capacities into the light of conscious reality. In the brevity of a single human existence, this ideal state of absolute wholeness is only ever approached, never fully realized. Yet, those who possess the raw nerve to move toward this mountain are participating in what Jung beautifully named the process of individuation. Individuation is a relentless, hazardous, yet deeply rewarding journey that contributes directly to a profound health in both body and mind. The supreme tragedy of the modern neurotic is that they have voluntarily abandoned this path. They have allowed themselves to become completely stuck within the narrow, suffocating confines of a stagnant comfort zone. They have mistaken safety for life, using their historical trauma as a psychological fortress to keep the terrifying demands of reality at bay. And because they are stagnating, their personality is rotting from the inside out. To break this self-inflicted paralysis, Jung warns us that mere intellectual analysis or reading more books is utterly useless. The treatment of a neurosis demands nothing less than a total, uncompromising renewal of the personality. It is an aggressive campaign working in every single direction and penetrating every hidden sphere of human life. While this grand ideal of psychological wholeness is the ultimate peak we must climb, actually moving toward it requires the immediate selection of highly practical, real-world goals. You must choose a definitive target in the realm of your career, your financial independence, your interpersonal relationships, or the rigorous cultivation of highly difficult life skills. The goals you select cannot be timid, comforting, or safe. They must be bold enough, terrifying enough, to violently force you out of your comfort zone and to permanently break you free from the errant, repetitive ways of your past. For as Jung noted with absolute conviction, often a total liberation from the past and a beckoning toward a future rich in possibilities is entirely sufficient to break a neurosis. For the young person especially, who still has the vast majority of their life ahead of them, this forward turn is often the only medicine required. A beckoning future lies directly ahead, rich in terrifying and beautiful possibilities. It is sufficient to break just a few of your historical bonds, to stop looking back, and the inherent primal life urge within the human animal will do the absolute rest. You do not need to fix, mend, or untangle what happened to you 20 years ago. You simply need to have the courage to open the door to a future that is actually worth fighting for today. But opening the door to a vision of the future is merely a conceptual beginning, because a grand destination is completely worthless if you refuse to take a single step onto the path of execution. This brings us to a brutal truth that separates deep, transformative psychology from the shallow lies of modern self-help. Intellectual insight into your neurosis will never be enough to save you. It is obviously not enough for a neurotic to know how his illness arose and whence it came. For we seldom, if ever, get rid of an evil merely by understanding its causes. This is the ultimate systemic failure of our modern, hyper-reflective culture. We have built an entire generation of highly articulate, self-aware individuals who can describe their anxieties, their parental traumas, and their personality flaws with exquisite poetic detail. They know every clinical term, every therapeutic label, and every historical justification for their misery. Yet, despite this flawless diagnostic vocabulary, their lives remain completely broken. They remain paralyzed in the exact same spot, deeply addicted to comfort and utterly terrified of the demands of reality. The reason for this tragic paralysis is that we consistently choose to forget a fundamental law of human behavior. The crooked paths of a neurosis do not just exist as abstract thoughts in your mind. They lead directly to an army of obstinate, deeply ingrained physical habits. A neurosis is a living, breathing neurological network carved into your daily routines through years of choosing avoidance over confrontation. Every single time you shrank from a life challenge, every time you chose the safety of your bed over the terror of the world, you were physically reinforcing a habit of cowardice. You cannot think your way out of a physical habit. You cannot philosophize a neurological pathway out of existence. For all our brilliant insights and psychological theories, these crooked paths do not disappear until they are aggressively replaced by other habits. And habits are won only by exercise. The patient cannot heal by sitting in a comfortable chair endlessly talking about his past. He must be forcefully drawn out of himself and thrust onto other paths. He must physically move his body, engage his hands, and force his attention into the external world. The sheer beauty of Jung's constructive approach is that it grants you absolute permission to stop overanalyzing your history. You can adopt this path of healing without ever understanding what caused you to become neurotic in the first place. You do not need to spend years untangling the complicated, infinite web of your childhood just to begin addressing your problems in the here and now. You do not need your parents' permission. You do not need a formal apology from the people who wronged you. And you do not need to feel completely healed before you choose to act. You can start choosing a bold goal today, right now, in the middle of your anxiety and your brokenness. Dwelling on the past may provide you with an endless, comforting supply of excuses for your neurotic ways, and it may fully satisfy your ego's desperate need to justify its own weakness. But these justifications will never cure you. They will only ensure that you remain a permanent patient, paying someone to listen to your historical alibis while your potential wastes away. We must finally accept Jung's unyielding ultimatum. It is only in the today, not in our yesterdays, that the neurosis can be cured. Because the neurotic conflict has to be fought today, and historical deviation is a detour, if not actually a wrong turning. The battle for your sanity, your strength, and your psychological freedom cannot be fought in retrospect. The enemy is not the shadow of your parents from 20 years ago. The enemy is the habit of retreat that you are practicing at this very second. If you choose to turn off this video and slide back into your comfortable routine of avoidance, you are actively choosing to feed the sickness. Drop the historical alibi that has kept you small for so long. Stop playing the spy upon your own past and start playing the master of your current reality. Burn the excuses. Step out of the suffocating safety of your comfort zone and face the immediate challenges waiting outside your door. Build that bridge into your future with the raw brick and mortar of new, disciplined actions. For the past is a graveyard, and it is only on the fierce, unyielding battlefield of today that your life can truly begin. As we stand at the crossroads of our own minds, looking back at the long, winding road of our personal history, we are forced to reach a definitive conclusion. The modern epidemic of anxiety, depression, and existential paralysis is not a life sentence, nor is it a permanent defect etched into our souls by a difficult childhood. It is a modern alibi. We have been systematically trained by a culture of comfortable victimhood to believe that our current stagnation is justified by our past wounds. We have turned our intellects inward, playing the spy upon ourselves, digging up old ghosts, and meticulously detailing our traumas, all while the battlefield of the present remains completely abandoned. But Carl Jung's constructive standpoint shatters this comforting illusion. True healing does not require a flawless retrospective map of your childhood or a deep excavation of psychiatric folklore. Knowing exactly how you were infected with a disease 20 years ago cannot save your lungs today. The neurosis you are battling is not a ghost from yesterday. It is an active, aggressive focus of infection that lives, breathes, and operates in the absolute immediacy of the right now. It is sustained entirely by the crooked paths of your daily habits. Your repetitive, unconscious choices to favor the suffocating safety of your comfort zone over the terrifying demands of reality. You cannot think, analyze, or talk your way out of a physical habit of cowardice. It must be brutally beaten out of your nervous system through rigorous, daily exercise in the real world. The ultimate lesson here is one of radical, terrifying accountability. The shift from a wounded child to a powerful, self-governing adult happens the exact moment you realize it is no longer your parents, your past, or your circumstances standing in your way, but yourself. To apply this to your life right now, you must declare a permanent ceasefire with your history. Stop demanding an apology from a past that cannot give it. Instead, choose a bold, concrete target in your career, your health, or your personal growth. A goal that is terrifying enough to force you out of hiding. Build your bridge to the future not with insights, but with disciplined actions. Replace your habits of avoidance with habits of confrontation. Treat every single challenge waiting outside your door today not as a threat, but as the exact arena where your self-mastery must be won. For your life is not happening in your yesterdays. It is happening right now, on the fierce and unyielding battleground of today. To help everyone in our community reflect on this journey together, I would love to hear your personal perspective down in the comments below. What is one small, immediate action you can take today to face a current challenge without letting a past excuse hold you back? Please share your thoughts below so we can all learn from each other's experiences. And if this exploration brought you value, make sure to subscribe to the channel to support us in keeping the spirit of psychological freedom alive for our upcoming videos.